Meeting of the Billings City Council. And then we'll jump into our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And invocation. Just as a few reminders, there's only one microphone in the room here today that picks up sound. That's the large square pizza box up there. Please try to speak clearly and loudly, because if you're on one end of the room, your voice has got to get all the way to the microphone, or I'm sorry, to the speaker. No, yeah, the microphone. To slow the spread of the coronavirus, Governor Gianforte's directive from February 12, 2021 encourages all Montanans to wear masks. You'll need to turn down the speakers. Or face coverings, and to follow CDC social distancing guidelines and best industry practices. To that end, and at least for the time being, masks or face coverings are required for all persons attending the meeting in person, and council members and staff will do our best to comply with that rule. However, masks do make it more difficult to understand when someone's speaking, so a speaker may remove his or her mask if providing public comment at the podium or council members and staff are speaking from their seats. Since I'm often interacting with council members and staff, I hope you'll forgive me if I don't always replace my mask promptly. The good news is that I and many other council members and other staff members, and hopefully the public, are now fully vaccinated. I do encourage all members of our community to get vaccinated to protect themselves, others, and our economy. About public comment. During any public comment period, I'll ask first for persons that are here in the library to go first and to use the podium, and then I will look to people using Zoom. Anybody appearing by Zoom will need to register in advance following the instructions that appear on the cover sheet in front of each City Council agenda. That's available on the city's website. They'll need to use the raise hand feature on Zoom to tell the clerk that they are ready to speak and that their microphone should be unmuted. People in this room will not be able to hear, or I'm sorry, people in this room will be able to hear, but not see the person who is commenting on Zoom. Further instructions on how to attend virtually are available on the agenda cover sheet. If you have any questions, please always feel free to call the clerk during normal business hours at 657-8210. So with that, if you would, please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation by Councilmember Ronnie. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Creator God, for those that came before us, thank you for those that came before us, who protected the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the land that produces our food. Help us to always remember that we hold an equal responsibility to those that come after us. As a governing body, help our policies to be kind, our decisions to be just, and our motives to be fair. Help us to be discerning, responsible, courageous, and forward-thinking. Help us to hold truth as a leadership quality to be respected, followed, and encouraged. As a community, help us to grow our economy, flourish in compassion, and empower our youth to be good stewards of our planet and good citizens of humanity. Help us to be good partners with our urban centers in Montana, and help us to serve our rural communities in ways that we can. Thank you for your protection, your forgiveness, and your ever-present grace. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen. Tony, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Shaw. Here. Yakowicz.
Present.
Neese.
Excused.
Ewald.
Here.
Joy. Present. Tariki.
I am here.
Purinton.
Present.
Ronan.
Here.
Foyette.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. Thank you, Tony. Our next item up on our agenda is our COVID-19 update. I see that our county health officer, John Felton, is with us, so I'll turn it over to John. And John, I know I at least will be interested to get your summary and reaction to some of the legislative developments now that the legislature has concluded, that might impact our COVID response and the local Board of Health's powers. And then I understand you've got some incentives for vaccinations. So look forward to your report. John Felton, it's all yours.
I have to say that the audio coming out is a little more difficult to hear this time than it was last time. So hopefully you can hear me and I'll be able to hear any questions. I'll share my screen first and go through some data. I have some additional stuff to share. And then we can talk a little bit about the legislative decisions. And then I'll open up for questions. So let's see here. Do you see that okay?
Yes.
Yep. Make it full screen. Okay, do you have the full screen there?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just an update on the data you've seen before. So at a state level, we've been fairly steady for about the last month or so, a little over a month. At a local level, you can see we've been really at a pretty steady level for about 2 months now, since the middle of March till current. Right around that same level, some daily ups and downs, but pretty steady. When we look at the proportion of cases that are Yellowstone County cases, again, we're about 15% of the state's population. So you can see the 15% mark there. And we've generally been under that for most of the last several months. We did see some increased activity over the last couple of weeks. We were below the 10 per 100,000 per day. Again, that is 10 per 100,000 per day for Yellowstone County is about 16 cases. So you can see we notched above that. For the last couple of weeks, we did come down a little bit this week compared to last week. So that difference between 11.5 cases per 100,000 per day and 10.7 is about 8 or 9 cases a day. For the week, sorry, 8 or 9 cases for the week, so just a little over a case a day. When we look at where we are on a monthly basis, again, you can see that through the first few days of May, we're a little bit higher than we were in April, but basically the same level. Test positivity also came up a little bit last week, the week ending May 1st. We don't have the week ending May 8th data yet because that comes out from the State Health Department on Tuesdays. So we'll see what that looks like. I'm guessing it'll be roughly about the same, maybe a little bit lower, roughly about the same. This is where we have seen a little bit of increase. This is our inpatient hospital census for people who are admitted for COVID-19. You can see that over the last couple of weeks, we did see a little bit of an upward trend. It's come down a little bit. So we're probably roughly somewhere in that 15 plus or minus a little bit inpatients. It's probably about our baseline level. I think we're seeing about our baseline level of cases because again, when you look and see that it's been very steady for the last 2 months, again, even with a little bit of up and down, it's basically pretty close to the same level. So I think we're kind of in that same boat for case inpatient care as well. And we have been a little bit higher for Yellowstone County patients than regional patients, which makes some sense with the lower caseloads. The regional hospitals are better able to manage their own patients, not have to send as many to Yellowstone County. I'm going to show this slide twice actually because I'm going to come back and revisit this. But you can see that about 14% of our cases have now been school-aged. We still continue to have about 65% of our cases in that 20 to 59, that working age adult. So that is a large proportion of our cases are in that working age adult cohort. When we look at the cases that are on a weekly basis, age 19 and younger, you can see it has continued to grow a little bit. Part of this really does come also from the number of cases are smaller. So as we have a few more in that school age, which we are not surprised about, as a proportion, it takes up a little bit higher number. Now we're going to talk about vaccination. This is why I'm going to come back and revisit those age data a little bit. So far, we've administered about 105,000 doses in Yellowstone County. We have about 50,000 who are fully vaccinated, a little over 50,000. You can see that the rate of change on that fully vaccinated number is starting to slow. Bear in mind that the definition of fully vaccinated is 2 weeks beyond your final dose, and most of those in our state are second dose. So when we think back to where we started seeing a decline in the first dose utilization, it was about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And so now we're starting to see it takes 5 weeks really to get that second, to reach that fully vaccinated status. So now we're starting to see that. This chart looks at the portion of the population that is presumptively immune, either through natural infection, which is the blue bar, or through vaccination. And you can see vaccinations has increased at a much higher level. We go all the way back here to mid-February. This was 9.9% of the population had been naturally infected, known to be naturally infected. Again, there are some asymptomatic folks who would have never been tested, but the known positives was 9.9% of the population. 3 months later, that's only climbed to 10.7% of the population, which is good because that means our cases have slowed down. It is definitely safer to increase community immunity levels through vaccination. We always have to remember that although people do typically have reactions to the vaccine, they are relatively mild. 5% of naturally infected cases end up in the hospital and 1% end up dying. So it is far safer to increase that community immunity rate via vaccination. It's also far faster. Totally going to come back and revisit this. Remember that 65% of our cases are in this 20 to 59 working age adult. So when you break down the vaccination data, this is on our website, riverstonhealth.org. It's actually covid.riverstonhealth.org is where the data are. Here is, so here's 25 to 65 here, basically. Remember that 65% of our cases are in that 20 to 59. Now, these are different age cohorts because the data come out in different databases. But it's not till we get up to that 65 plus, which is outside that previous cohort right there, 20 to 59, that we begin to see over 65%. So this is a target, really an important target for vaccination because this group represents a significant portion of our cases, but a lesser portion of our vaccination. So the way you read this is, for instance, at this 65 to 69, 65% of all people in that age cohort in Yellowstone County have been fully vaccinated, and 69% of people age 70 and above. This is critical because that 60 and above is where most of the death and hospitalization happens. So this really protects that vulnerable population. I wanted to talk a little bit, this is something you haven't seen before also, about the variants. So as you can see, this is as of May 7th. This is data that's updated by the state on a weekly basis. The state, I think, has had 188 variants at this point. 11 of those are known to be in Yellowstone County. Now, the way this is done on a random selection of cases sent to the state health department for testing, the PCR testing. And so this is surely not 100% of the cases of variants, nor is it really, we shouldn't think that this is the only set of cases. But when you look at Gallatin County, Missoula County, and Valley County, all those have significantly more. There's more travel in those areas, particularly Gallatin and Missoula, because of the colleges. We know that our colleges don't have as much sort of coming and going. So we do have 11 of those. This is the classification that CDC uses, variants of interest, concern, or high consequence. And you can see that in Yellowstone County, of our 11 cases, those 11 are all variants of concern, which means evidence of increased transmissibility, more severe disease, decreased impact of antibodies. And so 9 of the 11 are the UKB 117 variant, and 2 of those are the B1429 variant that is a California variant. So you can see where we are. The bulk of the variants are those variants of concern. So that is where we stand in terms of sort of the data. Again, I feel like we're sort of at a baseline level, and we should not be surprised that cases and hospitalizations periodically will go up a little bit. They'll also go down a little bit. What we're really be cautious about is not seeing those really significant spikes in cases and hospitalizations. So people still need to be careful. The mayor asked about some of the legislative changes. I can tell you that it's not at all clear what those legislative changes mean. I know county attorneys are looking at those, and public health is looking at those, and county commissions and city councils are looking at it. There's not a clear and unambiguous agreement on what they mean. So certainly some of the key ones, Senate Bill 108, which is carried by a local billing legislator, Senator Doug Carey, allows if more than 5% of the registered voters want to contest a public health action, an emergency action, that must then go to vote at the county's expense by within 30 days, and the public can overturn those. Again, a reminder: we don't have any restrictions in Yellowstone County at this point, and haven't since January, early January. There's been no county level restrictions. House Bill 121, and I refer to these are laws. These are approved by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. It's just an easier way to refer to them rather than by code section. But House Bill 121 is what allows actions taken by boards of health or local health officers to be submitted to local governing bodies, which are city councils or county commissions, for approval. So essentially what happens then is the Board of Health or the local health officer make recommendations to those local governing bodies, and then they must act on them. I will tell you, it's, most health departments in Montana are county, and so there's only one governing body. It's the county commission. In our case, the sponsoring local governments of our multi-jurisdictional service district are Yellowstone County, the city of Billings, and the city of Laurel. So there's going to need to be some determination how, if there was a bill or a rule or order that came out, how we would address those here. And this, again, the law is silent to this. So you can imagine a couple different scenarios. One being all three have to agree in order for that action to be taken, in which case basically you give veto authority to any one of the three bodies. The other possibility is that the majority wins. So if 2 out of the 3 governing bodies agree or disagree, that's what becomes the controlling vote. So there needs to be some determination made at the level of those local governing bodies, how that will be implemented in our multi-jurisdictional service district. The other thing that's not clear, one of the requirements is that law is that the local governing bodies must approve the health officer and must approve any rules. We do have rules in Yellowstone County unrelated to the pandemic. So things like on-site wastewater or septic system. We have a local rule for septic system. We have a local rule related to body art, tattoo, and piercing. And obviously we have an appointed health officer, so it's not clear as if existing rules or health officers need to be approved, or if only when those are modified or changed or new or created anew, whether it needs to go through. Again, the law is silent to that, so that is a legal determination that will need to be made. Another one that is a matter of interest is House Bill 257. And what that one really says is that it prohibits city or county, local government, including public health, from interfering or coming between the relationship between a business and its customer, or preventing customers from accessing a business. Again, that is not at all clear how extensive that is really applied. Clearly, it was intended to stop public health orders or public health rules from taking actions like limiting hours of operation or limiting occupancy. It's written very broadly, so I'm not sure to what extent it affects other actions that local governments might take with respect to, for instance, business licensing or anything that would really interfere in that relationship that would stop a customer from accessing a business or business from serving a customer. So that one also will be figured out. And then the last one that I think is of particular import is a series of acts that relate to vaccination. We don't have a vaccine passport in Montana, but if someone wanted to, the law prohibits that. There's a lot of concern about House Bill 702, which has been passed and signed into law, that it prevents discrimination on the basis of vaccination status. What it also could mean, again, it depends on how broadly these get construed, is that those of us who provide healthcare to patients will no longer be able to require our staff to be vaccinated. But we must allow a reasonable accommodation if someone chooses not to be vaccinated. The hospitals have a lot of concern about that. For instance, people who work in OB or neonatal services, if pregnant women or babies are exposed to measles, that can result in the death of the child or very severe birth defects, including deafness and blindness. So if we can't require our staff to be vaccinated, how do we make sure that those pregnant women and babies are safe? So again, I think the legislature clearly was, in my opinion, was responding very dramatically to the pandemic and actions that were taken related to the pandemic. What I think we have to be careful of is that we don't create a lot of unintended consequences that put the community or individuals at risk. And that won't be known until these are really sorted out as to how they're going to be implemented. So with that, Mayor, I'll stop and I'll be happy to answer questions people might have to the extent that I can.
Thank you, John. I was alerted to a incentive program starting this week. Is that true for people getting vaccinations?
Oh, the incentive program, yes. So you've seen a lot about incentives around the country. Riverstone Health Foundation, which is not a part of Riverstone Health, it's actually a separate entity that supports Riverstone Health through philanthropy, received a $20,000 donation from an anonymous donor who asked that be used to incentivize people to get vaccinated. This donor is concerned that not enough people are getting vaccinated. So the way the foundation has chosen to execute this is on Thursday will be the first time everyone who gets vaccinated, whether a first or a second vaccine, will receive $50 in cash. And this, again, is not coming out of any tax money. It's not coming out of Riverstone Health. It is a donation to Riverstone Health Foundation. Along with that, the other thing you might have heard, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it reminded me of this, today the FDA issued an emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine to be used for children aged 12 to 15. It was previously approved only at 16 and above. That is not the end of the process. So that's the first step. On Wednesday, and I don't remember what APIC stands for, it's basically the Advisory Commission for CDC on how to manage immunizations. They are meeting and will be advising CDC as to whether that and under what conditions that 12 to 15 age cohort should receive the Pfizer product. So at this point, if someone goes to a clinic tomorrow, one of our clinics, they will not be able to receive the vaccine at their age 12 to 15 until after CDC makes its determination, which is expected probably Wednesday after APIC meets. So if CDC approves the use of the vaccine and we can get it put together for Thursday for 12 to 15-year-olds, then they would also be eligible for that incentive. But at this point, it's really important for folks to realize the emergency use authorization is one step in the process. But if 12 to 15-year-olds show up tomorrow at our site for immunizations, they will not be able to be immunized until after CDC acts, which again is expected hopefully Wednesday.
Okay, thank you, John. Questions? Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Hey, John, I just want to clarify. You said that everyone that comes into the shrine to receive a vaccination will get that $50 incentive beginning I think it was tomorrow or something. I read that it's the first 400 people that come in. Can you?
Right, the first 400.
Okay.
At $50 a person, and there's the $20,000 will serve 400 people. I will tell you that we've not been anywhere close to 400 in our recent clinics. So hopefully we'll get there, but thanks for that clarification. It is the first 400 people on Thursday. If we don't spend it all, if we don't get 400 on Thursday, then we'll do it at another time, but hopefully we will get there. We are far short of that in terms of people who are scheduled for Thursday. But you can also walk in on Thursday and get a vaccine as well.
Thank you, John, and I assume you're not forced to take the money. If you really want to leave it as an incentive for somebody else, that's probably okay with the foundation. So,
Yep.
Other questions for John? Councilmember Tricky?
I just want to say that the sound quality coming out over the internet is very echoey and scratchy.
Thank you. It's been really hard to hear from the.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there's anybody with our tech team that can do anything about that or wave a magic wand, but we apologize if that continues. We're not exactly sure how to fix that. Other questions for John Felton? Any other questions for John? Don't see any. John, thank you again for your efforts and your staff and team, and we'll continue to see those vaccination rates rise, we hope, and we continue, or at least I continue to encourage everybody, get out there and get vaccinated, especially in that children through age 60 group that is so important. So thank you very much. With that, then, we'll move on to our next item on our agenda, which is approval of our minutes. The April 26th minutes are pending and not available, but the April 12th minutes are available. And is there a motion or any discussion concerning the April 12th, 2021 minutes? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we approve the minutes for April 12th, 2021 as read.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw indicates that she would like to make a second. Any discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval of April 12, 2021 minutes. Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes consistent with the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move on to council courtesies. I'll get us started. I do have several tonight. First, just a reminder that we're now into filing season for positions on the City Council. Every 2 years, 50% of the 10 regular council seats come up for election. And this year, also, the mayor's seat is open. So this is the time for filing through June 21st is the closing date. Just as a reminder, democracy works best when there's a real election. So please, if you're interested or you know somebody who is, get that word out. Second, the Montana Municipal Insurance Association awarded Billings kind of a unique award dealing with our workers' compensation coverage, and that's the MMIA's Award for Loss Control Achievement for First-Class Cities for the 2019-20 fiscal year. And that award goes to the first-class city, the 7 largest cities in Montana that has the lowest workers' comp claim. And even though we are the largest city, and I specifically asked if that's just a gross number or somehow netted out for size, and they said no, it's just a gross number. And so even though we're the largest, we had the lowest claim history there during that period, and so it's a real testament to all of our city employees and their departments and city administration and the emphasis on safety. And so that will result in saving our taxpayers dollars and most importantly keeping our employees safe. So thank you and congratulations. Lastly, the Treasury Department guidelines for how the dollars under the American Rescue Plan will be allocated and spent came out this afternoon. It's about 151 pages, and if you've got a problem with insomnia, I'll guarantee you that will fix it. If you're curious, just go online. You ought to be able to find a set, or contact me, and I'll send a set to you. So those are council courtesies for myself. Other council members, what else do we have? Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I appreciate you giving me this time to read a statement. I was very honored to have been invited by the Native American Women's Coalition throughout the state of Montana to speak alongside Governor Gianforte and representatives from Senator Daines and Senator Tester's office, recognizing May 5th as National Awareness of Native American Missing and Native American Women. I'm sorry, I'm getting this messed up. Let me just read my statement. On July 5th, 2013, the family of 21-year-old Hannah Harris reported her missing. Having attended a 4th of July celebration the night before, Hannah, a 2010 Billings West High School graduate and mother of then 9-month-old Jeremiah, had not returned home during the night nor by morning. 4 days later, Hannah's badly decomposed body was found. She had been raped and murdered. The National Crime Information Center reports that in 2016, there were 5,712 reports of missing American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls nationwide. However, the U.S. Department of Justice had data on only 116 cases. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention has reported that murder is the third leading cause of death among American Indian and Alaska Native women, and that rates of violence on reservations can be up to 10 times higher than the national average. However, no research has been done on rates of such violence against American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls aged 10 to 24 living in urban areas, despite the fact that approximately 71% of American Indian and Alaska Natives live in urban areas. To fill this gap, in 2017, Urban Indian Health Institute, a tribal epidemiology center based in Seattle, Washington, began a study aimed at assessing the number of cases of missing and murdered American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls in cities across the United States. This study sought to assess why obtaining data on this violence is so difficult, how law enforcement agencies are tracking and responding to these cases, and how media is reporting on them. Shockingly, the study learned that lack of reporting, data collection, and data analysis exists nationwide. Of the more than 5,000 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, the Institute was able to collect data on only 506 cases throughout 72 American cities. Based on the data that was able to be collected and analyzed, Montana came in 5th in the nation with the most MMIWG cases, and of the 72 American cities from which data was able to be collected, Billings also came in 5th with the most MMIWG cases. In 2019, Montana's Senator Steve Daines brought forward a resolution co-sponsored by Senator John Tester designating May 5th nationally the birthday of Hannah Harris as National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Native Women and Girls. And this resolution continues each year since. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other council courtesies this evening? Are there any other council courtesies? Not seeing any, we will continue then to our proclamations. We do have a proclamation this evening in recognition of the 60 Hours of Living United in Yellowstone County, and the resolution or the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas for 60 years, United Way of Yellowstone County has been devoted to engaging the community in making a meaningful difference to positively impact people's lives. And whereas United Way of Yellowstone County is focused on improving education, financial stability, and health outcomes for all of our neighbors in Yellowstone County. And whereas throughout the 60th birthday blowout celebration, United Way of Yellowstone County will showcase many generous people and businesses who have answered our county's biggest human service problems with philanthropy. And whereas United Way of Yellowstone County will host 60 hours of celebrating, first collection drive for diapers for Family Promise on May 11th, that's tomorrow, 60-minute volunteer opportunities on May 12th, and an online auction and car raffle drawing on May 13th. Now therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of Billings, do hereby proclaim May 11 through May 13, 2021 as 60 hours of living united in Yellowstone County. And tonight it's my pleasure to introduce and ask to come to the podium Executive Director of United Way, Yellowstone County, Ms. Kim Lewis. Kim, it's all yours. What can you tell us about these events?
Well, thank you. First of all, the party starts tomorrow, and we wouldn't be celebrating 60 hours of celebrating if we hadn't been here for 6 decades. So really, thank you for the shout out. Thank you for the opportunity for United Way to continue to make a meaningful impact in our community. We dug up all of our old annual reports and tallied our numbers, and I think something that's impressive to share with our community and to say thank you is that over 60 years, we have raised and distributed more than $30 million to make a difference in our community. And it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for donors, if it weren't for board members, if it weren't for people who spent time on an allocations committee, if they weren't our dedicated community partners or anybody else that has supported United Way, maybe through even serving others and participating in our Day of Caring. So we just wanted to say thank you to the community. Thank you for helping us be a strong, stable organization in Yellowstone County, and we look forward to continuing to make a difference, changing lives, improving lives, and saving lives. We appreciate your support. Join us online at uwyellowstone.org if you need details on any of our partying. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kim. Thank you to all your volunteers and all your staff members and the great job United Way does in Yellowstone County. Okay, our next item up, then our council reports. Are any reports from other bodies that council members serve on behalf of the city? Seeing no council reports, then we'll move to our city administrator report. Chris Kukulski.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you mentioned earlier, this afternoon, the American Recovery Act funding interim guidelines came out, so we've got a fair amount of work to do to understand what's within those 151 pages. Andy has already submitted the critical information necessary to receive what we would anticipate as first half funds. So what we're understanding so far is that the distribution will be made over 2 years. And the total would be approximately $16.4 million over 2. So in this first year, $8.2 million. But all of the rules and specs around that is what we're feverishly looking through the 151 pages to understand. So that started this afternoon. Also, Mayor, you mentioned, and thank you, the MMIA award. It's certainly not necessarily something a lot of people are going to understand, but the bottom line is it, most importantly, it shows prevention or priority of safety for employees, and it saves tax dollars. So often I'm asked, what do we do to be more efficient and effective? Well, one way is we keep a safe environment for people to work in, have a culture of safety, and there's absolute direct dollars saved because those premiums are based on what's paid out. So thank you to our employees, all the supervisors, especially those on the front line who are working with employees day in and day out. Next up is just an update for you on the Bruce Lane project that was added to the bid a few weeks back. So first of all, thank you to Public Works, who successfully negotiated with the design engineers to get a fair price on design for that. Next up, once that work is done or gets far enough along, will be to negotiate with the contractor. And either way, as long as we get a fair, reasonable price from the contractor, you'll see it back on consent for your approval of that contract, or I will let you know we did not get a fair price. I would encourage you to leave it back without Bruce, and Bruce, the fact that the design would be done is not wasted, because Bruce will need to be done either with this set of projects or the next set of road projects in the suburban. Bringing that back on consent will make sure that we absolutely have no problems with public notice and public opportunity for people to comment on that addition. You've seen a little bit, I think, in my weekly, and maybe you've talked to county commissioners. I have been working with a developer who is working on a development of several hundred lots at what actually is not the entrance to the Intervale Loop. They don't need the Intervale Loop. It's along Alkali Creek, but it's right at that corner. And in our minds is critical. If we don't get utilities to the first 300 or 400 houses that go in that area, every time a project happens, it's going to be more difficult and more costly to get utilities through there. So just an FYI, we're working on that with the developers, with the county commissioners, and having those conversations, which frankly directly in my mind tie back to the TED conversation we had for the better part of 2 years, that we were going to find a way to do these projects right at the front end instead of finding ourselves in a Briarwood or Yellowstone Country Club scenario where 2 decades from now, 3 decades from now, we're trying to fix something that we could have gotten right now. So that's out there. For consent tonight, back to tonight's agenda, the mayor will be commenting on removing items E and F so we can correct the public hearing dates on those. You may have seen an email to that effect for July 12th versus June 14th. So those 2 adjustments will be made in that conversation. And almost done here. Just a reminder, I don't know how we're picking up, as several have commented. Sound is not working great tonight. Ask you please to remove your mask and speak as clearly as possible to try to pick up sound to help people who are listening. No ex parte communications. And next week, remember, we're together 3 nights in a row to work through the budget. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We are going to wait for next week with bated breath. We can hardly wait. Councilmember Ewell.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Chris, after the discussion with the TED and working together with the county commissioners, and they promised to really help us out, so are they going to refuse to let these people go ahead and build down there so that they have to go into the city, or are they going to say open with welcome arms, say, come on, we'll let you do anything you want to do?
I can't answer that question. I can tell you, like I said, I've talked to all 3 county commissioners and the developer. We've had a couple of different meetings. Most of those include the developer and John Oslin, who was kind of pretty heavily involved in the discussions that some of the council members and I had. We're trying to make it so that there's benefit for all to recognize that there really is one way to do this right at the front end. So, answer to your question, I cannot tell you affirmatively that they will or won't, but we're trying to make sure that from an economic standpoint, it's the most economically viable and makes the most long-term sense for the public and the private sector to get utilities in here now and get annexed sooner rather than later.
Follow up, Mayor, please.
Go ahead, Councilmember Ewell.
So then what it's amounting to is whoever gives them the best proposal is who they'll be able to go with. They're not going to unify and say, I think you should go with the city.
Well, I encourage us to unify. I encourage us, you know how much I stressed over the issue of giving utilities expansion into that Lockwood 10. And to me, you said, the primary exchange was to find a collaborative solution for the other borders of the city if we make this, if we made that TED project a go. So I think I bring it up in part because, hey, I want you to all be aware, and really it comes down at the end of the day to relationships between elected officials on the city and the county side as well as staff. So I need all of us working together to that end.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then to public comment on non-public hearing items. Tonight, that is only item 1, our consent agenda. All other items 2 and 3 have public hearings. So if anybody is on Zoom or present in the library here who would like to comment on anything on our consent agenda, item 1 and then the subparts A through G, this is your opportunity. Please come forward to the podium and give us your comments. We'll ask that you keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and tell us your name and address up front, which will help the clerk. So with that, is there anyone present here who would like to comment on item 1A through 1G? Seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom? Just a reminder to use your raise hand feature so that Tony knows to take you off mute. I don't think there's any sort of a delay, so Tony, do you see anybody with their hand up to comment on item 1?
We do not currently have any attendees.
Okay, don't see any comment then on our item number 1. We'll close comment. Again, you'll have opportunity for public hearing on items 2 and 3, and on at the very end of the meeting on any non-agenda item. With that then, we'll move on to item 1. First for separations, as Chris said, I will just separate on my own initiative item 1E, resolution of intent to annex property on South Billings Boulevard, and also item 1F, resolution of intent to expand the boundaries of the South Billings Urban Renewal District. Pursuant to the email that we got on Sunday, we just need to correct and make very clear a new hearing date for those 2. But are there other separations from any other council member? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be abstaining from item 1G, 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other separations? Seeing none, we'll proceed then with the non-separated items. Is there a motion pertaining to those? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we approve consent agenda items except for 1E, 1F, 1G, and 1 and 2 as stated.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Councilmember Shaw makes the second. Discussion now on the motion for approval of the non-separated items. Is there any discussion, questions, or otherwise before we proceed to a vote? Seeing none, we will move to a vote on the motion for approval, non-separated items. All in favor, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are? All members of the City Council present vote in favor. Motion passes unanimously. That then brings us to item, the first separated item, 1E, resolution of intent to annex the city-owned property. And my understanding is the only change is this change of hearing date from June 14 to July 12. But I don't know if we've got Wyeth. Yeah, we've got Wyeth with us. Wyeth, can you just comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. And I do apologize. I can barely understand when any of you are speaking, so I got that part, but if there's other questions, I'll see how it goes. It's the sound is really tough. So this item, under annexation law for city-owned property, there's a 2-part process for annexation where you first have to do a resolution of intent to annex the city-owned property and then set the public hearing date. As you have said, Mayor, and as Chris explained at the beginning, we need to have the date moved from June 14th to July 12th for this item. And it's due to the zoning portion of the process. That city-owned property is in the county, And we need to make sure we have the time through our process with the annexation process and the zoning to get that zoning in place so that it all comes to you on the 12th for those actions. So that's the reason for extending this out. We have already updated the resolution, and we're also, we'll make sure, and I've already been coordinating with the city clerk on the public noticing to make sure we notice closer to the public hearing on July 12th.
Okay, thank you, Wyeth. Can you just clarify for us, Wyeth, whether the sound is any better for people not in this room, but who are on Zoom? For John Felton, for example, was he coming across more clearly than we are?
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Felton you could understand him very well, yes. And I've only heard from a couple of, like Councilmember Chirithi spoke briefly and I could understand him, but other than that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That tells me it's probably a problem with our one microphone here, most likely. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and make the motion for approval of item 1E, consistent with the staff recommendation, with the exception that the date be changed for the public hearing to June 12th and that all of the documents be changed to reflect that. Councilmember Brown makes the second on the motion. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Purington.
I think when you made your motion, you said June 12th instead of July.
Oh, thank you for the clarification. Yes, it's a change from June 14th to July 12th. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor, all members of the City Council, motion passes unanimously. Next item, 1F. That's the same change from June 14 to July 12th for the hearing date. I will make the motion for approval consistent with the staff recommendation with that change and changing any documents to reflect that date change. Councilmember Boyette has the second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be voting against that for the reason that adding more to the Suburra down there, it's like increasing or putting on special districts. Money gets you taxing property tax owners without them having a say in it. But this is even worse because it's unfair. At least if you got a special district, supposedly it gets spread across the whole city. But if it's a TIF district, everybody ends up paying, but only those in the district get to benefit from it. So for that reason, I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Councilmember Purington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be not voting for this. And I think because of some of the materials that we had, there's quite a bit that had to do with the cost of putting in infrastructure. And I think there was a major trunk to the water system that needed to be put in. And so if there was some way to do a cost analysis in order to see what some of those expenses might be and how they would pan out with what the taxes might be to come in as revenue. So I too will be voting against that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if Wyeth Friday could respond to those two conversations just to give us his input.
Okay, Wyeth, our planning director. I don't know if you remember Councilmember Ewald or Wyeth. Councilmember Ewald's concerned about locals paying more, and Councilmember Purington's reference to a study on the cost of a water line in the district. If you can comment on either of those.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't hear most of what you just said, and I didn't hear I heard about 3 or 4 words of Councilmember Ewald and not anything really of Councilmember Purington, so I don't know what they were asking. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you, Wyeth. Councilmember Boyette, would it be okay if we see if we can punt to our city administrator who's here with us, and hopefully people listening will be able to understand Chris Kukulski. Chris?
So I think on the first set of arguments, and please let me know, Councilmember Ewald, if I'm not understanding it, I think it really is a general argument about TIF districts, period. And that is when a piece of property is inside a tax increment finance district. So in this case, you're being asked to, you're setting the resolution of intent to expand the suburban district to include more properties. Anytime a piece of property is inside that district, any increment, any investment on that property, those tax dollars can only be spent, generally speaking, within that boundary. And the argument that's been made over the years is that's all well and good for everybody within the boundary, but everybody else in the city outside the boundary arguably pays more to fund the rest of city services that are being provided. I would say there's strong arguments on both sides of that. The other extreme of that is to say without the TIF, there wouldn't be that investment, and the investment is being incentivized because we've got dilapidated or non-existent infrastructure that needs to be invested in order to try to bring the area up to a standard. So rather than general taxpayer paying for that infrastructure, that neighborhood or everybody within that boundary is paying for those investments. So I hope I characterize that accurately from Councilmember Ewald's concern. The second one, I don't have the specifics on the water line. What I would say is, again, it's a resolution of intent, so those public hearings will be held. We could talk more specifically about what infrastructure deficiencies are there that justify adding these properties to the overall boundary, because you do need to pass kind of a test. You can't just create a TIF district anywhere. You couldn't pick, it's just to be extreme, you couldn't pick the Shiloh corridor with all new roads, new utilities, new services, and say somehow there's a deficiency in utilities there. So in this case, the property would become eligible for investment in infrastructure, whether it be water, wastewater, streets, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other discussion on the motion for approval item 1F? Back to Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. Do I have to speak up louder?
I think that would be helpful. We don't know if it'll make a difference, but it can't hurt.
So the issue with these pieces right here, they're all bare land, and bare land brings very little tax base to this TIF district. So if you build a garage there, it's going to add to the TIF district, and everybody in the city's got to pay for that much that the TIF district is getting out of that. So when you're bringing in bare land, you're not bringing in anything to the TIF as far as base. And it's pretty hard to declare bare land as being blighted. I think bare land is opportunity waiting to be developed.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are Councilmembers Joy Boyette, Brown, Ronning, Shaw, Yakowicz, Tariki, and Cole. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are Councilmembers Purington and Ewald. Thank you very much. The motion passes. Brings us to item 1G, 1 and or 2. Is there a motion pertaining to any of those? Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I move to approve consent agenda item number 1G, 1 and 2.
And is there a second? Councilmember Boyette? Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council present, with the exception of Councilmember Brown, who abstained. City Administrator Chris Kukulski. Chris.
Mayor, as much as I don't want to prolong the meeting, because I think we might be on a trend here to get done in the next few minutes, 20 or 30, the suggestion is if we take a 5-minute break to reboot the system, that may help with the sound challenges we're having.
I don't think we have any choice but to do that, Chris, so that's exactly what we'll do. Council members, feel free to step away if you need to, but we'll try to get back as quickly as we can get rebooted. Thank you.
I mean, if they can't hear us, we're in trouble.
Community 7, you can turn on the on switch. Okay, welcome back after our break. Our apologies to members of the public who might have been tuning in before. We have solved the problem. Magic has occurred on this end. So we'll move on with our meeting on item number 2 of our regular agenda. And Tony, would you read item number 2?
Muted.
Tony, you're muted if you were reading item number 2. There you go with this.
Public hearing and first reading ordinance expanding the boundaries of Ward 1 to include recently annexed property in annexation 2005B, a parcel located west of AJ Way and north of Highway 3, legally described as tracts 1A and 1B of Certificate of Survey number 1889 amended. Total approximately 21.852 gross and 20.016 net acres. Lupine Holdings LLC petitioner. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Our presenter this evening is Monica Plecker. So, Monica, it's all yours.
Yes, thank you. I typically don't have presentations for these items because more often than not, they're the same night as the actual annexation petition. So I do have just a couple of slides. This is a public hearing to include recently annexed property into Ward 1. This public hearing does require first reading and then a second reading, which would happen on May 24th. The reason why this particular ward boundary hearing is not the same night of the annexation to be met within a certain amount of time before the property could be officially annexed into the city. Therefore, at your last business meeting on April 26th, or at a previous business meeting on April 26th, the developer satisfied those conditions with approval of the development agreement, and therefore we can move forward with the ward boundaries. So that's all that I have. This is in particular the property that we're discussing. This is the 20 acres that would be west of AJ Way. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Monica before we open for public hearing? I don't see any, so and if you've got questions, you can raise them after our public hearing. Then we'll open it up for public hearing on item number 2, the ward boundary change that you just heard described. Is there anyone in the room here with us tonight who would like to comment on item number 2? I don't see anyone, so if you're listening by Zoom and you would like to comment, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom so that our clerk, Tony Keener, knows that she should unmute you. Tony, do we have anybody who has raised their hand on Zoom to comment tonight?
We do not.
Okay, our public comment period, our public hearing on item number 2 is then closed. Back to council. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the first reading ordinance expanding the boundaries of Ward 1 as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette indicating second. Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is for approval. If not, we'll proceed to a vote. Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion for approval, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council present. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item number 2. Thank you. Back to Tony for item number 3. Would you read item number 3, please?
Item number 3, public hearing and resolution creating SID 1417, Elysian Road. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Debbie Melling has a presentation for us this evening on item number 3. Debbie?
Hi, thank you, Mayor and Council. Let's share my screen here. Okay, so as Tony said, this is SID 1417. It is the area north and south of Elysian Road, west of Maloney and east of East Lane. You can see it here. This map's a little different than what you normally see because north is to the left. So there's a section just north of Elysian and then several areas south of Elysian. This is a really confusing one because, and I'm sure as you all read the memo, you caught that, all of these different parcels are going to be subdivided. And so that will be forthcoming. But as of now, these are the lots that we have to work with. So it is a little confusing, but these are the areas that you can see here. So this SID is for the construction of Elysian Road. This is a graphic that just shows what it will be just to the west of Parkway Drive, which is what you see here, is where the project starts, and it goes over to where the existing Elysian Road has been improved to date. And so there's a roundabout. It is a collector. I wanted to bring that up. So a lot of people drive Elysian and they think it's an arterial. It's a relatively high-speed area right now, but it is classified as a collector, and there will be residential properties, multifamily, commercial, and residential along this road. So the design is in keeping with that. You can see the roundabout there. There's traffic calming bulb outs at Walter Creek, which is just to the west, or sorry, to the east of the roundabout. Street lights in a couple of the subdivision areas, pedestrian facilities, which basically include the crossings and then the path around the roundabout. Associated landscaping, there's on-street parking plan for Elysian, and it includes the storm drain that's required for constructing the street itself. The financial information for this project, we're just over $2 million. The project in total is over $4 million. The McCalls, who own all 4 of these parcels, are doing the rest of the work with cash. So this SID is for the remaining $2.1 million. All 4 parcels are owned by McCall Development. Again, these are the same improvements I just talked about, but basically the construction of Elysian Road, including curb gutter, the road improvements, and everything else that goes with it. And streetlights will be in 2 of those subdivision areas that were shown on the map. The project schedule for this SID, the resolution of intent was approved back in April. Tonight is the resolution to create. If it is approved, there are no protests. If it is approved, we'll bid construction tomorrow. Elysian Road will be closed during the summer months, and the reason that it's fully closed is so that we can get all of the work done in the time school is out of session. So the work will be completed before school is back in session, and then the assessments will be on the fall taxes. So I'll put that back up there. If there's any questions, I can certainly answer them.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Debbie? Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. Debbie, what creates a qualification for bumping a collector up to an arterial? Because I could imagine that street's going to get even busier as development, continues to grow out there. So what would create Elysian to become a arterial street?
So for the most part, we have a functional classification map, and it makes the assumption of full build out. So when we look at Elysian, the reason that it was defined as a collector is because it really doesn't go to anywhere. So our collectors are things like Broadwater, Central, 24th, 27th, anything that takes you to a destination. The collectors are what takes those neighborhood streets and gets you to the arterial. So Maloney is the arterial, East Lane, the frontage road. Those are all the arterials out there, and Elysian basically gets you to those arterials. So that's why it's classified a collector. I don't anticipate, just because of the nature of how it will develop, I anticipate it will stay a collector.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Debbie? Debbie, I might just ask you, what happens if the bids come in very high? How does that work with the McCalls? If I understand it right, there's a $2.1 million and change cap on the SID. So if they were high, do they have to pick up more because they have to keep in that 50-50 type relationship? Just how does that work when you don't know the actual cost?
So you're exactly right. If these come in high, SIDs, we do not go above the amount of the SID creation. So what we're creating here is the maximum amount that we will do. Because there's more work to be done, the McCalls use this as a funding mechanism to put a consistent SID on every property. So it's built more around an amount versus the actual scope of work, if that makes sense. So at the end of the day, they want the assessments to be exactly the same amount for every property. There's plenty of work to do, so what they'll do is they'll just modify the amount of cash that they put on the project if it goes in high.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Debbie before we open it up for public hearing? Councilmember Tricky.
Are we foreseeing another east-west road going into Milani from the frontage road?
No, I don't think there is any more east-west roads. There's some down further south, but they don't go through. So Milani dead ends basically at the river, and there's not another road that's a major connection to the south.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions for Debbie? Any other questions for Debbie? Don't see any, so we'll open up for public hearing. This is the public hearing then on item number 3, the resolution creating SID 1417. If you'd like to comment here in the library, please come to the podium. Don't see anyone here in the library, so if you'd like to comment online using Zoom, please you go to the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen and click on that, and that will tell Tony or clerk that you'd like to comment. Please ask that you keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and tell us your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Tony, do we have anyone who has raised their hand on Zoom to comment during the public hearing?
We do not.
Okay, public hearing then is closed on item number 3. Back to council for further discussion or motion. Councilmember Joy.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the resolution creating SID 1417 as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Councilmember Chiriky. Motion's made and seconded. Discussion now on the motion, which is for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion again is for approval. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Thank you very much. The motion passes unanimously. And that concludes then item number 3 and brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. So if you would like to comment now on anything that was not on our agenda tonight, please come forward. If you're here in the library, we'll take comment here locally first and then look to Zoom. So please come to the podium if you'd like to comment on anything that was not on our agenda tonight.
My name is Catherine Card. I live at 2815 4th Avenue South here in Billings. Mayor and Council, since you oversee the Billings Police Department and you consider the money that is put into that department, I want to give comment, as I have to you repeatedly in the last few months, to say that allocating more money and hiring more officers will not fix the fact that the Billings Police Department is not able to effectively deal with the high crime rates in Billings at this point. The Billings Police Department, in my opinion, does not have the infrastructure for maintaining public trust and maintaining honesty. I've written to you extensively about my experience at the Road Dog Toy Run in December, and I want again to use that as an example of lacking infrastructure generating public trust, in that event, of all the events that are put on in Billings, of all the parades, of all the processions that are put on, including the one that's done downtown, the ones that are done downtown. This one does not go through the Public Works Engineering Office. It goes through the police department. The police department has approved it for years, but has left no documentation of that approval, has required no review of that approval, and has no information on who actually approved it. And you have to wonder why. That is, of all the events in Billings, that is the one. My exposure to the Road Dog Parade was that it was a mess. Plus, there were motorcycle gang members there. Billings is really nonchalant about, and the police department included, nonchalant about the gangs here in town, and particularly the Galloping Goose is the specific one involved in that procession of the road dogs. When I asked the, Captain Coral once about why they allowed the gang members to be there, flashing their colors, which allows them to establish territory, he said that the Billings Police Department is not the fashion police. I felt that was very disrespectful. If the police department's core values are to give service to the people of Billings, part of that is to recognize us as customers, and that didn't happen with me. I will be writing again an extensive opinion on and experience on what I found in public records, and asking you to consider that throwing more money at this department will not be effective at this point. It needs major organizational overhaul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the library to offer public comment on non-agenda items? Don't see anyone here in the library, so is there anyone online watching by Zoom? If so, again, please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen so that Tony knows that you should be taken off mute, and so you can comment. Just ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and tell us your name and address up front. Tony, do we have anybody on Zoom who would like to comment on non-agenda items?
We do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Public comment on non-agenda items is closed. And I'll just comment for Ms. Card's benefit. Her email came in during our Monday night meeting 2 weeks ago, which was a very long meeting, and we had hundreds of emails, so I apologize. I hadn't really got to that, your email, until this weekend, and it was rather lengthy. But I have now at least read that, and if anybody on the council has not, I would encourage you to do so. There's definitely a lot to chew on there. Anything else? Council initiatives then. Council, do we have any council initiatives this evening? Councilmember Tariki.
So I'm thinking City Administrator Kukulski a little while ago asked us to officially form some groups to deal with the legislature and to deal with the county, and I think that's something that we should consider. I'm willing to make it a formal request if you want it that way, but I think we can probably deal with it right here, right now. During session as well. Personally, I'm willing to step up and be part of the subgroup, or whatever we want to call it, that deals with the county commissioners.
Chris, I don't remember the details. That seems fairly vague, but potentially important. I'm going to ask you to comment if you would like to.
I might need some help here. I think my recollection is you have some rules of procedure for the council treating quite differently a group that the administrator puts together versus a group that you put together. So my recollection is if it is a formal council group, so let's just say for the sake of discussion, an initiative created a subcommittee of the city council that were, for the foreseeable future, be the interface or a primary interface in building relationships between Yellowstone County and the city. I think we've got some process you have to go through to do that, more than just bringing it up in this manner. Quite different than if the city administrator says, hey, as frankly, actually in a similar, but on topical to the TED, Councilman Roning and Councilman Brown work with me and the county commissioners working on the TED. That was not the formal kind of thing. So really depends on which direction you want to go as to how formal or informal you want to proceed with the concept, and then therefore what process you need to follow from there.
Okay, we can have some discussion. Just a reminder, none of this was on the agenda, so if we were to take formal action, I think it'd be important that the public know, and we put it on a future agenda. But for general discussion purposes, I guess no harm done, as long as it's reasonably brief. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important for all the city council members to understand we're members of the county. We can talk to our county commissioners at any time we want about anything that we want. We've had several discussions concerning the TED and this around the inner belt loop. I do believe that they're honorable. I believe that they will do what they can, but in reality, they can't just refuse to let people build. That's not a reality. And I think we need to educate ourselves a little bit on that before we expect that to be a solution. But I would encourage everyone here to contact any of the county commissioners and visit with them on any issue, including the properties up by the inner belt loop, and encourage them to look back at their notes and look at some discussions that we've had in the past concerning exactly this. Not to say there's tit for tat, but there were some discussions on how we should move forward as a partnership. So please contact any of the county commissioners.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Councilmember Ronning and then Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. I would agree with Councilmember Brown, as well as add on to that when City Administrator Kukulski or Assistant City Administrator Ifland or any of the other city staff go and speak at the county commissioner meetings, if you're a council member, I encourage you to offer support and attend those meetings with the city staff and offer public comment and encouragement as well, and show our city administration support along that lines as well. But we're welcome to go to their meetings just like they're welcome to come to ours. But it's important to show that support there as well, and be with our city administration there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. And I would agree with that also, because the county commissioners have so many meetings. If there were an issue that staff was going to the commissioners, maybe for us to at least be able to be aware of it. But I was going to say the same thing that Councilmember Brown mentioned about the legislators. The legislators here in Yellowstone County are very accessible, as was proven through this last legislative session. There were legislators that were contacted by council members to work with certain issues, and they also in turn addressed some of the council members to say, can you support this? So I'm not sure to what degree that your hope is, Chris, with with bringing these subcommittees together. Because I'm quite comfortable in talking with all of our legislators and commissioners. So I'm just not sure to what degree that would help.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Trachey.
It's one thing to be comfortable going to meetings and talking to commissioners and legislators. It's another thing to be systematic in how we talk to them. And what has happened over the years and what's happening right now is we made an agreement over the TED district to actually figure out how the county and the city were going to deal with the edges. And in fact, the Inner Belt Loop report suggested very strongly that we do that. What has not happened is any systematic effort in order to make that happen. And what I'm suggesting is that if we want to see the intersection between city and county being developed in some sort of systematic way. The Inner Belt Loop, what's happening up there along Mary Street, what's going on the West End. I mean, the time is now. We need to actually start taking this seriously because, frankly, there are a whole bunch of developments and a whole bunch of money that's going on out there on those edges, especially in the heights, that we need to be thinking about and paying serious attention to. So yeah, definitely reach out, talk to them, but I think we need to be a little bit more systematic than just talking to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Brown?
So Danny, are you making the motion then? The initiative?
I am happy to make a motion to so I'm happy to make a motion that we put on a future agenda to create a subgroup that starts talking to the county commissioners about how we're going to develop on the interface between the city and the county.
There's a motion made. Let's clarify the motion before we even look for a second. Councilor Trachey, it wasn't to actually take this step now, but to put something on a future agenda that would allow for a vote at that time, is my understanding of the motion. Presumably, between now and then, there would be a little flesh added to the bones here on the details of what that might look like. But is that a fair statement of your motion?
My original intent was just to create it tonight, but given some of the comments that people made, it makes sense to have public comment on it and to put a little bit more thought into it. So yeah, my intent is to flesh it out a bit and put it on a future agenda.
Okay, and just to clarify, back to Chris's point, you're not specifying whether this would be a formal council agenda or council committee at this point, or a city administrator informal group, if that's the right terminology at this stage. Is that correct, or did you want to clarify on that issue?
I would. I would ask for what the city administrator's feeling on that is.
Okay, before we look to a second, I'll turn it back to Chris, and then we'll come back to the rest of the council. Chris, the question is kind of which is your preference on that issue, I think.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I think the idea would be in that next discussion, we should talk about the pros and cons of both. We should talk about what your rules of procedure are for a very formal creation, what that might gain us versus a more informal approach. I certainly would agree. I do. The reason I brought it up, and I'll acknowledge it was not, it was something I thought about for a long time, but it was not prepared to say this is what we should do. I do agree with both sentiments I'm hearing this evening. Everyone has access to the county commissioners, but you could argue since everyone has access, no one has any deliberate access if we don't have a systematic way that we want to strengthen this relationship. So I would suggest the mayor, in answering the question, that be a part of the dialogue, the conversation the staff and you have together when this is on the agenda to talk about pros and cons of a very formal or more informal administrator-led subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. So with that clarification as to the scope of the motion, is there a second to the motion? Councilmember Joy, I saw your fingers up, I think, before, so we'll say you have the second. Now, discussion on the motion itself. Councilmember Ewald?
Thank you, Mayor. I thought we decided here, I don't know, a year or so ago that there's a formal paperwork that needs to be filled out to bring initiatives, and that it's supposed to be presented to the council at least one business meeting before it's presented.
And there I'll just comment, since I initiated that form, I initiated that form with that request, and yeah, I still think it's a good idea because it kind of forces us to be very specific about what these initiatives are. But we didn't adopt a policy mandating that. There's nothing in our charter or ordinance that requires it. So I still think it's good practice, but there's nothing that I would say that requires that. Further discussion now on the motion. Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Danny, it sounds like your motion is about a very specific group, so the group would have a very specific focus versus coming together like we did with the state legislators in two different Zoom sessions, and then out of that really came the legislative piece that we sent to the state legislature regarding public safety. What I'm hearing, your motion is very specific toward the development along the inner belt loop. Did I get that correct?
I think there are actually a number of issues that we should be working together on. I just think that not the inner belt loop, but the edges, especially in the heights, are very critical at this point and need to be addressed as soon as possible. So I would not say it's specific. I would say it is something that should be ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The reason I seconded the motion is because the work of the legislature is out of session in a sense, but as we've heard tonight from Mr. Felton, and as Chris Kukulski kind of alluded to, there are all these bills that have been passed that we still don't know how they'll be implemented. There are things that are unanswered about how the bills will impact the city. So I don't think the work with the legislature ends at the moment they're dismissed. I think it continues on because there are going to be continued work by the legislature and to the governor to figure out how to implement these bills, and the impact that it will have on the city are how those bills are impacted, how those laws are, they're not bills anymore, how these laws are going to impact the city. So I think that there's a scope of work that we can sit down and think about, and maybe Danny, as he brings forward a more formal paper, or maybe brings forward the paper that the mayor has put together, a more formal scope of work as to what we want and really need to talk to our legislators about. Because the work of the legislator is just beginning. How does it get implemented? How does it impact the city? What things are we not yet thinking about that will be a part of the new laws that have been passed? So thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion, Councilmember Yakovich?
Thank you, Honored Council. I wanted to get my mask off.
He's been holding his breath for an hour and a half, so.
I'm reluctant to support this because I'll challenge a council. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of boards that we need to be part of. County commissioners meet once often, and I don't know how many of you actually go to these meetings. Mr. Brown will be stepping down from the CETA board. I'll be stepping down from a very important board, the Bright and Beautiful board. But all of you are doing a great job in what you're doing. but also at the same time, I feel there's a lot of boards that we've been assigned to already that we have need to re-sign to. And so I worry that we stretch ourselves too thin, as well as just the nuts and bolts of actually, I would echo what Mr. Brown said, is that, how many of us have actually gone to city council, county commissioner meetings? How many of us have actually sat down with them before we start doing this greater yeoman's job, which I know also we have the Stillwater Building Committee, we got all these other committees out there, and I'm not always sure what they're doing. So I just am reluctant to support something that we stretching ourselves a little bit more thinner than we should. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further comments? I guess I'll just comment. I'll intend to vote against the motion, not because it may not be a good idea. I just think it's a little premature. We need to see what discussions might look like between staff and the commission. But maybe there may be an opportunity in the future to do something like this. Although at that point, I do think when it comes to initiative, it's good to follow the form and just force that discussion to clarify exactly what the proposal is. But other discussion on the motion? Other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I have no problem supporting this as long as this is going to come back for future discussion in terms of what exactly the committee will look like, which is exactly what it sounds like City Administrator Kukulski is planning to do. So for that reason, I'm fine provisionally supporting this. I think it is a really good idea for us long-term to think about this, not only for this council, but for future councils and putting those tools in place. So I think it's a worthwhile discussion, so I'll support it for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion? Councilmember Trickey.
And just to be clear, it wasn't my intention tonight to actually form this, but it was my intention to bring it up as an issue and to try to start getting us to make some progress on this. So I'm fine with a motion to put in progress, something that starts putting some shape to what this is going to look like.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Before we proceed to a vote, any last items of discussion or comments? If not, we'll proceed. Again, the motion is in favor of just initiating this. It would come back on an agenda. Presumably, Councilmember Trickey would work with staff to put together some sort of a written report, and it would come back for later approval on a future agenda. With that, then, is the motion clear before we proceed to vote? Don't see any other questions then, so all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are Councilmembers Joy, Shaw, and Chiriqui. If voting in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Councilmembers Purington, Cole, Boyette, Brown, Ronning, Yakowicz, and Ewalt, so the motion fails. But the idea hasn't failed necessarily. We may come back to this. It's an important one. Councilmember Trickey.
So, what I'm trying to get moving here is some ideas to how to move forward with this. So if you don't want to do that, what do you want to do?
On point of order.
Yeah.
Can we do that during council discussion at another meeting?
Yeah, Councilmember Trickey, I think we've had that discussion, but let's talk offline. Let's talk amongst ourselves. Come back to at a different meeting. But
I didn't hear what we're doing then. So what you're saying, what we're doing then is just each of us going out and talking to commissioners.
To be determined, but that's certainly a good start, and to work through staff. Anything else before we adjourn for the evening? Councilmember Brown.
Just a comment on that question. I think a real good way to coordinate with our city administrator. He's got his thumb right on the top of everything. If he needs assistance, he's never hesitated to reach out to me at least, and ask if I can help out or if I can, offer advice or for anything else. So I would recommend maybe that's the first start is get with the city administrator and see what his needs are. And if we need a committee, then I'm all for it.
Okay, thank you. And I certainly am not closing that door at all either.
So just so I'm clear of what I heard, so what you're saying is that we're asking the city administrator to come and tell us what he needs help with and how he'd like to move forward on it.
I would
Is
say
that what
that's,
I'm hearing?
I would say that's certainly my desire, and it sounds like Councilmember Brown's, and I doubt anybody would disagree with that. So, but to be determined. But thank you for raising the issue. It's an important one. Any other council initiatives? I don't see anything else. So thank you, everyone. We are adjourned until next week when we get to see each other's faces 3 times. So see you then.